There comes a point, a quiet surrender. It might find you slumped on a worn bus seat, the cold tile of a bathroom floor pressing against your cheek, or simply the edge of your own bed. The location is irrelevant. It's the sensation that matters, not mere tiredness, but the feeling of an internal collapse. A bridge, strained beyond its intended capacity, finally yielding. If you've known such a moment, you understand it's not marked by a dramatic crash. It's a soft, almost silent folding, as if your very heart whispers, "I can't bear this weight a moment longer." Those who've endured too much recognize this experience on a level others can't fathom. The peculiar truth is, you seldom realize you've become this person until life compels you to acknowledge it. Someone might ask, why are you so unfazed by things that should upset you? And you struggle to articulate that it's not calmness, not peace. It's a muted numbness, the result of your mind being stretched far beyond its design. It's the stillness that descends after your emotions have run countless marathons without respite. Most equate resilience with unwavering strength. But for those who've been through the fire, resilience feels more like a primal survival instinct, something you do because you have no other choice. Consequently, you carry a certain psychology that others instinctively sense, even if they can't articulate it. There's a gravity about you, a depth etched behind your eyes, a gentleness in your listening, a considered pause before you offer answers. You learn to fold your emotions into compact shapes, tucking them neatly into the corners of your mind. You master the art of moving forward, even when your inner world is a tempest. There's a paradox at play. Those who've weathered too many storms often appear wise, composed, mature, thoughtful. The ones who seem to have it all together. Yet, if anyone could glimpse their internal landscape, even briefly, they'd realize this maturity wasn't earned through gentle growth, but forcibly extracted. It wasn't a choice, but a necessity. Some blossom because they are nurtured. Others are forged because life denies them the innocent childhood or carefree youth that seems to be everyone else's privilege. When you've carried more emotional weight than your spirit was ever meant to bear, it fundamentally alters the way your mind organizes itself. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as emotional overcompensation. When your nervous system is repeatedly overwhelmed, it begins to rewire itself, not perfectly or gracefully, but desperately. It adapts through heightened awareness, through emotional bracing, through anticipating the worst, even when it's unlikely to materialize. If you've ever wondered why you overthink, why you're hyper-attuned to subtle shifts in tone, why you feel compelled to prepare for problems that haven't even surfaced, this is the underlying reason. Your mind learned that uncertainty was a threat, so it erected defenses you never consciously requested. And even with healing and growth, vestiges of these defenses remain, like ancient foundations beneath a renovated structure. Those who've endured too much often possess an invisible curriculum vitae. They can decipher unspoken silences. They can sense rising tension before anyone else. They navigate conflict with the same care one would use to step around shattered glass. They know what it's like to soothe others while their own heart races with anxiety. They know how to minimize their presence when attention feels unsafe. They recover quickly from disappointment because life never afforded them the luxury of falling apart. They develop emotional reflexes that others misinterpret as personality traits, but they are not inherent traits. They are survival mechanisms, learned responses, psychological autopilot scripts ingrained into the nervous system, often from a young age. Research in developmental psychology reveals that prolonged periods of stress, uncertainty, or emotional overload can recalibrate the brain, making it more sensitive to threats, more reactive to subtle cues, more attuned to patterns that others miss. Some call it intuition, but for many, it's simply pattern recognition acquired through necessity. There's a tenderness in those who've weathered too much, a gentleness born from knowing the intimate reality of pain, not just its abstract concept. This tenderness is frequently mistaken for weakness, but those who've navigated heavy moments understand the truth. Softness isn't born of an easy life, but a difficult one. A life that has instilled empathy through immersion. A life that has revealed that everyone carries hidden burdens. This empathy creates a curious paradox. You become the person who effortlessly comforts others, so instinctively that they fail to realize you've seldom experienced true comfort yourself. You understand others because you've been forced to understand yourself in ways most never have to. You know how to offer warmth because you've survived frigid chapters. You know how to hold space because there were times when no one held it for you. But beneath that empathy lies something else: exhaustion. The quiet weariness of someone who has been strong for too long. Not the external exhaustion you show the world, but the internal one you bear alone. The exhaustion that doesn't lead to rest, but to retreat. The exhaustion that isn't alleviated by sleep, only by profound understanding. You become someone who can carry everything except themselves. Someone who can nurture others but struggles to ask for help. Someone who offers clarity but lives with unanswered questions. It's not a matter of distrusting others. It's that your mind learned early on that relying on others was unpredictable, and unpredictability feels like the prelude to instability for someone who has been through too much. People often wonder why those who've endured too much become emotionally independent to the point of isolation. But for them, independence isn't about confidence, it's about protection. It's a shield, the safest option in a world that has felt unsafe too many times. They learn self-soothing, self-analysis, self-correction, self-care, not because they desire it, but because they require it. This creates a distinct pattern. The outside world sees someone capable, composed, grounded, while the inner world knows someone tired, sensitive, quietly overwhelmed. This duality profoundly shapes their psychology. They become accustomed to emotional contradictions, open yet guarded, caring yet detached, present yet distant, hopeful yet cautious, emotionally rich yet selectively expressive. Those who've been through too much don't avoid vulnerability because they dislike it. They avoid it because vulnerability has historically carried consequences: disappointment, misunderstanding, emotional imbalance. They learn early that vulnerability isn't a shared experience, it's a risk. Consequently, they open up slowly, carefully, deliberately, revealing themselves in layers, not out of manipulation, but out of self-preservation. But here's the truth that almost no one tells them. Nothing about them is broken. Their reactions make sense. Their caution makes sense. Their depth makes sense. Psychological adaptation isn't a flaw, it's a response to circumstance. The mind is a storyteller, and when someone has lived through too many difficult chapters, their psychological narrative becomes more complex, their emotions more nuanced, their internal world layered with meanings that others can't see. And yet, despite everything, there's something profoundly beautiful about the psychology of those who've endured too much. They are often the ones who love quietly but deeply. They appreciate small kindnesses more than grand gestures. They notice details others overlook. They cherish moments of peace because they know the chaos that exists. They value emotional sincerity because they've witnessed the cost of pretense. One of the most remarkable traits they possess is their unwavering perseverance. Even when their heart feels heavy, even when their mind feels exhausted, even when their future feels uncertain, they continue, not because they're unbreakable, but because they've already been broken before and found a way to stand again. There's a wisdom that can only be gained from surviving oneself, a maturity that can only be achieved by navigating emotions without a map, a self-awareness that can only be forged by being forced to decode one's inner world. Those who've lived through too much carry all of this within them, like unspoken chapters of a book they never intended to write. But here's what most people miss. Beneath all the survival instincts, all the emotional reflexes, all the maturity, all the depth, there's still a part of them that wishes life had been easier. Not perfect, just gentler. A version of life where they didn't have to grow up so quickly, where their nervous system wasn't trained to brace for impact, where they didn't always have to be the strong one. Yet, even without that easier version of life, they continue to move forward. They continue to show up. They continue to carry a wisdom that feels far older than their years. They become the kind of people who can transform their experiences into understanding, their lessons into compassion, their pain into depth, their struggle into a quiet strength. Those who've endured too much don't just survive life, they interpret it, they examine it, they reflect on it. They transform their past into insight, their emotions into meaning, their experiences into perspective. And in that transformation, even if they never fully realize it, they become a beacon of light for others. They become the person you turn to when you need honesty, calmness, or clarity. They become the person who listens without judgment, who understands without needing every detail, because they know what it feels like to carry something you can't articulate, to hold emotions that don't yet have words, to long for someone to understand without asking you to relive the entire story. And that is where their unique psychology becomes not just a reflection of their past, but a gift to the world. There's a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when someone who has been through too much begins to recognize that they perceive life differently than others. It doesn't happen suddenly, it's a gradual realization. Through subtle observations, you notice that the things that send others into a panic barely register with you. You notice that the things that elicit excitement in others feel muted within your chest. You notice that your mind is always 2 steps ahead, analyzing possibilities, preparing for outcomes, bracing for emotional ripples before they arrive. At first, you might believe this makes you strange, but over time you come to understand that this difference is simply the residue of everything you've carried. Those who've lived through too much develop a relationship with reality that is both intimate and distant. On one hand, you feel everything deeply, sometimes too deeply. On the other hand, you've learned to detach from that depth when it becomes overwhelming. This simultaneous ability to feel and detach isn't something you're taught. It's a survival mechanism constructed by your psyche, a way of balancing emotional intensity with emotional protection. Psychologists sometimes refer to it as emotional duality, the ability to feel empathy while suppressing vulnerability, to appear calm while navigating internal storms, to remain functional while your mind carries burdens others don't see. This duality shapes the way you move through the world in ways you rarely consciously recognize. You become someone who hesitates before embracing happiness, someone who analyzes comfort before trusting it, someone who quietly asks, "Is this real?" even when things are going well. Not because you're inherently negative, but because your brain has internalized the pattern that good moments were often followed by difficult ones. And even if life changes, even if your circumstances improve, your nervous system doesn't easily forget. It still braces for the fall, even when the ground is solid. This can complicate your relationships, not because you lack care, but because you care with a depth that frightens you. You fear losing people before they're even truly yours. You envision the endings before the beginnings have a chance to settle. You apologize too readily, you forgive too easily, you remain silent about your own needs because you don't want to be perceived as a burden. You listen more than you speak, you give more than you receive, and when someone finally asks, "What do you need?" you genuinely don't know how to answer because you never learned to consider your needs without feeling a pang of guilt. Those who have been through too much often develop a singular form of love, steady, intense, quietly loyal, yet cautious. You don't love recklessly, but when you do, you love with a sincerity that feels rare in today's world. You notice the small things. You sense the emotional tone behind someone's words. You intuit when they're hurting before they verbalize it. You show up in ways that others overlook. But that sincerity comes at a cost. You are easily wounded, not by cruelty, but by carelessness, not by hostility, but by inconsistency, because inconsistency feels like the harbinger of abandonment. Abandonment, even the subtle kind, awakens ancient memories within your nervous system. This is what many fail to grasp. When someone who has endured too much reacts strongly to something seemingly insignificant, they're not reacting to the present moment alone. They're reacting to the echo of all the past moments when they felt unsafe, unprotected, unheard, or unseen. Their body responds to patterns, even when the present circumstances are harmless. Their emotions shift based on associations that were formed long before they possessed the language to articulate them. But instead of explaining this, they remain silent. They conceal their triggers, they mask their anxiety, they smile through discomfort. They prioritize harmony, even when their own heart is unsettled, because they fear being misunderstood, being labeled as overly sensitive or emotional. So they keep their storms private. Yet here's the irony. These same individuals are often the emotional anchors for everyone around them. They provide clarity, perspective, and meaning. They are the confidants friends seek out with their deepest fears and most vulnerable emotions, and they hold those emotions gently, compassionately, without judgment because they understand. They understand in ways that others can't. They've lived through experiences that compelled them to become emotionally literate long before they were ready. That emotional literacy grants them a unique kind of vision. They can see through masks, sense pretense, feel the tension in a conversation that others perceive as normal, discern when someone's "I'm fine" truly means "I'm not okay." They detect emotional shifts with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. This can be both a gift and a burden. A gift because it allows them to connect deeply with people, a burden because it means they feel responsible for emotions that aren't their own. They absorb too much, internalize too much, becoming healers without even realizing it. And healers, if they aren't vigilant, become exhausted. This exhaustion manifests quietly, not through dramatic breakdowns, but through subtle withdrawals. Someone who has been through too much won't always explicitly state that they're overwhelmed. They'll simply become quieter. Their messages will become shorter, their laughter will become softer, their presence will become lighter, as if they are slowly trying to fade away without alarming anyone. And when someone inquires if they're all right, they'll smile and say, "I'm good," because they lack the words to articulate the tempest swirling within them. They don't want to feel like a burden. They don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want to relive the emotions by giving them voice, so they keep it all inside. But there is another facet to people like this, a strength that is incomprehensible to others. Not a boisterous strength, not a visible strength, but a quiet strength, the kind that endures, the kind that perseveres even when weary, the kind that continues to show up for life even when life hasn't shown up for them. They've weathered too many emotional winters to be afraid of the cold. They've navigated storms without umbrellas. They've rebuilt themselves from ruins more than once, and that grants them something rare, inner resilience. Not resilience that looks heroic, but resilience that looks ordinary. The resilience to wake up again, to try again, to trust again, to love again, even when it terrifies them, even when they've been hurt, even when their mind whispers that it's safer to remain guarded. Because deep down, those who have been through too much still yearn for connection. They still crave understanding. They still long for softness. They still dream of a life where they don't have to be strong all the time. And it's this hope, small, quiet, but persistent, that keeps them moving forward. But hope alone isn't what shapes their psychology. What truly shapes them is the way they reflect on their experiences. They don't just endure pain, they analyze it, they interpret it, they transform it into insight. They search for meaning, even in the most difficult memories. They find lessons in loss, clarity in chaos, growth in heartbreak. This creates a worldview that is both fragile and powerful. Fragile because it's born of genuine wounds. Powerful because it creates genuine wisdom. A wisdom that fosters patience, empathy, and the ability to see life from angles that others can't. They understand that people are complex, that emotions are layered, that everyone carries a story, and this perspective makes them forgiving. Not out of weakness, but out of comprehension. They know that people act out of their own wounds, that hurt people sometimes hurt others, that healing isn't linear, that boundaries are necessary, but compassion is essential. But there's one more element to their psychology that often goes unnoticed. They carry invisible grief. Not always the grief of losing someone, but the grief of losing versions of themselves. The version who trusted easily, the version who felt carefree, the version who wasn't afraid of uncertainty, the version who believed that everything would work out without meticulous planning. This grief doesn't break them, but it shapes them, making them quieter, more thoughtful, more intentional, more introspective. It makes them cherish moments that others overlook. A peaceful morning, a genuine conversation, a gentle touch, a safe presence. These small things feel sacred to them because they've lived through chapters where nothing felt safe. And yet, despite everything, they continue to grow, slowly, quietly, in ways that others may not see. They learn boundaries, they learn self-worth, they learn emotional regulation, they learn to differentiate between instinct and trauma. They learn to open up again, not recklessly, but courageously, because those who have been through too much aren't defined by what happened to them, they're defined by what they chose to become after it. They carry scars, but they also carry wisdom. They carry pain, but but they also carry compassion. They carry memories, but they also carry hope. The more they understand their own psychology, the more they realize something liberating. They are not fragile, they are not weak, they are not damaged, they are adaptive, they are insightful, they are emotionally complex in a world that often favors simplicity. They are sensitive in a world that often rewards numbness. They are thoughtful in a world that often embraces impulsivity. Their mind isn't a battlefield, it's a testament to everything they survived, to everything they learned, to the depth that can blossom within a person when life has refused to be gentle. Perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: anyone who has endured too much has the potential to become a lighthouse, not because they're flawless, but because they know darkness. Not because they always shine, but because they understand how terrifying it is to be lost. In understanding that, they become the kind of person whose presence feels like guidance, who can offer warmth without expecting anything in return, who transforms pain into perspective and perspective into wisdom. They are the quiet ones who learn to live deeply, who learn to love slowly but fully, who learn to trust cautiously but meaningfully, who learn to rebuild themselves until their inner world becomes a place where they can finally feel safe. If you are one of those people, if you've lived through too much, felt too much, carried too much, then perhaps it's time you realize this. Everything you became wasn't accidental, wasn't random, wasn't weakness. It was adaptation, it was intelligence, it was emotional evolution. And now, even if you don't see it yet, you have become someone capable of creating a future far gentler than your past. Someone who can break old cycles, build new emotional habits, choose softness without fear, choose love without losing themselves, choose a life where strength is no longer a survival instinct, but a conscious, peaceful expression of who you are becoming. You didn't just go through too much, you grew through it. And that growth, even if it originated from pain, is now your quiet power.